So thank you very much for the invitation and also the opportunity to speak at this great conference, and really obliged to Professor David Donald and also other colleagues for hosting us, and also thank the chair for the introduction. Today, I would like to talk about the research I have conducted with Simin Gao of Tsinghua Law School about the future of international financial system from the perspective of the central bank digital currency network, as well as the regulatory outlook. This research, we have benefit from the UNSW and Tsinghua joint research grant, and also the support of the Herbert Smith Freehills Civil Center at the UNSW Faculty of Law and Justice. And let's look at the outline of this, what I will cover today. So at the very beginning, we'll have the introduction and also provides about the overview of what we're looking at central bank digital currency, which I found being very important because that is digital fiat currency. Like we're thinking of the China is piloting digital yuan, and also there are research into possible digital euro or digital US dollar may be the case down the track. So, so what about the CBDC, and also what is the CBDC network and network effects of such a possible digital currency network, and what are the implications for regulation? And my co-author Simin will talk about the impact of the central bank digital currency network on global financial network, and also with the concluding remarks. So firstly, we know that actually for central bank digital currency, it's a digital form of the fiat currency. And so the question we want to answer in this research is basically about that, we're shifting from a traditional paper currency to a totally new era of digitalization of the financial system, particularly the currency, as everyone is involved in currency, businesses, regulators, and other stakeholders. And we are thinking of what are the impacts of the central bank digital currency for the international financial system, which everyone lives in, and also what are the impacts for the regulation, because we will have some country, smaller economy already, like Uruguay, try to deal with the central bank digital currency. And major economies like China is actively piloting, digital currency of digital RMB in different cities with a huge amount of the transactions. And then what happened to the rest of the world, and what are the landscape we'll see down the track in 10 or longer period of time. And also we see that actually there are a lot of different categories of the digital currency, central bank digital currency. They're different from Bitcoin, because Bitcoin or Libra are issued by the private entities, while the central bank digital currency is a central bank liability. So they are fiat currency. So theoretically, everyone have to accept that within the jurisdiction in most cases. There are many categories, there can be retail CBDC, which means that individuals can access that, the target individuals. There can be wholesale CBDC, which means that they're only issued to financial institutions, which already engage with central bank. Or there can be a general purpose CBDC, which means that they target both sides, financial institutions, as well as individuals. And we see a different kind of technological design. Some of them use the DLT, some tend not to do so because they may have concern about, say, the volume that they can carry. So we see that in broader picture is that the private stable coins, like probably the first global stable coin like Libra, now renamed DM, and along with China's CBDC and also the possible response to COVID, makes the CBDC high at the table of many central banks. And there are surveys that there are central banks representing over 1/5 of the global population are thinking of issuing CBDC in the coming years. And we see that CBDCs like to be a game changer because they may have this, they involve not only currency, But you think about the data behind those kind of the currency, because they'll be able to enable tracking of the transaction. They also involve the issue like digital identity, who use that and to what purpose. And think about that, already have the plans that they may be used overseas. Their reports said, for example, China and Singapore are discussing whether it's a possibility to using the digital RMB in the future when they have consumers, or tourists moving across the border. So those are the possibilities where the central bank digital currency may be used across border, and they have impacts on monetary order, but also have a huge impacts on new issues like the digital identity, privacy, and even national security. If you want to think of the cyber attack that may happen. So we'll see that's come back to the research question we're thinking of. What are the future will be if we look at international monetary system, international financial system in view of CBDC. And we're thinking that there may emerge a network of CBDC, which means, as we see from network analysis, on set of relations or ties between different actors. Here we mean different central banks. We look at international level, and a CBDC network is like to come, and that will affect, the global financial system that we're having these days. And if we go to this, the second step, look at, okay, what are the possible or likely CBDC network? We have to look at, what are the actors or nodes, and they're of course the central banks. And if we look at those kind of the central banks attitudes, there are different attitudes. They have a attitude towards supportive attitudes. China, for example, is one example. Sweden, and also a bunch of the other countries, smaller countries, which some of them already issued the CBDC. And most countries like to be a mix and wait and see approach, as you see that the US, the Federal Reserve, and also the ECB, European Central Bank, Bank of Canada, and Central Bank of Japan, and so on and so forth. They are working actually, as some of them working as a group to explore the CBDC framework and the policy and so on and so forth. And there are limited number of countries which express that they will object to the CBDC because they may have a failure at an early stage, but the majority of the countries are either supportive or mixed position in that regard. And then, what are the ties that may emerge from those central bank digital currency? Because there are many implications, for example, for taxation, and this could be an easy example where CBDC may help to track the income and also make the tax connection more easier, as they are being discussed by the research on CBDC, and also that involves identity issue. But here you see that they have this is just a starting point, but you see many more areas which will involve the ties, like the information sharing and so on and so forth. But if we look at the forms of the ties, there can be, membership in the same international organization, like they have a committee regarding market infrastructure at the BIS, or linkage in monetary and payment system, because CBDC can be used for payments across the border, currency swap, linkage regarding foreign exchange systems, and fighting the financial crimes, as well as the treatment of foreign CBDC in a recipient state. And what are the purposes of ties? There could be the channel for transmission of materials like currency, or long material like the information rules. And the direction can be binary, but the flow of the currency may be imbalanced. And they also will involve issue like compatibility or interoperability. And there could be both positive relations, but there also can be negative relations if we think of one country impose economic sanction on another country. And then we have another question about, because for network, it's been important to look at, what are the actors, the nodes, what are the ties? And also we want to look at the structure, There's a three components that we can look at, analyze the potential CBDC or whatever network. For CBDC network here, we adopted a diagram from Andrew Sen about what the network may look like, and to think about what are the potential network of CBDC in terms of the structure. Actually, for the network, you have two ends of spectrum. It could be a very distributed network. It's basically a kind of flat one. It's not really one node which all act as a center. Or another extreme will be the centralized node. So everyone is connected with a central actor. The third one is in the middle, which is a decentralized network, which is kind of means that you may have groups of nodes. As you see here, that they have a kind of the cluster, which consists of different groups of the nodes. It seems that the central bank digital currency is not like to be a distributed network, because I think about a smaller economy which issue a central bank digital currency vis-a-vis a major economy issuing the CBDC, their links and their position in the network are unlikely to be equal or flat. Another end of the spectrum, the centralized network, is also not likely, because in the existing one we see the US dollar is being in the central, arguably the center of that traditionally. But in CBDC, they may have other major economies thinking of issuing that first. So it's not obvious that you have a central node in that regard. So it looks like that the CBDC network is like to be a decentralized network, which you may have, relatively small groups of nodes if they are share the similar positions or similar views or values regarding the CBDC. However, the structure, how they're linked within a cluster, remain to be seen. So if you look at here, we know that the cluster usually will form if there are dense ties among the nodes, so they have a cohesive subgroups, or you have ties to all other actors are similar. That may also happen. That's a structurally similar cluster, according to the Hafner, Burton's, and other colleagues' analyses. So we see that actually for the CBDC network, the structure is more likely to be the decentralized one. And actually, we see that some central banks may work as a group, to explore the technical design and policies of the CBDC. However, we have not seen a really wide range or collaboration, including all the countries or central banks in that regard. It looks like that they still have different groups of central bank working with each other in that regard. So that may seem to show that they're more likely to have a cluster emerging down the track, but we'll see what happens eventually. And then the next question for network analysis about, okay, what are the approach or form that a network take? Because just now we mentioned that the networks of CBDC can be a network, decentralized network. But another perspective look at the approach is that whether they are network as actor. You think about advocacy network. You work together to advocate. For example, reduction of poverty. That's a kind of network as actor, where the actors are coordinated. The network itself acts as for same purpose. Another side of the approach is network as a structure. So which means that, okay, the actors, the nodes in the structure, they don't really share the same idea. They don't have the same objectives. Instead, they actually, act, in an uncoordinated way. So that's what we call network as structure. And it looks like that, if you look at the CBDC, you see that they have a lot of different motivations or consideration of the network, because that, so this is about, for example, the relationship between central bank digital currency, which we use in payment system, used in taxation, in the possibly subsidizing different economic actors. And then that involves the issue about what's relationship between government and the of the market, And obviously, different central banks will have different role in that regard and different aspects, different views on that. And that also involves a relation about, for example, how do you link the CBDC with a private digital currency like Bitcoin and others. So some countries totally ban that. And some other countries, permit the coexistence of the, CBDC with the private digital currencies. So they're unlikely to have a same aim and objectives for CBDC. So it looks like that's the CBDC network is more like the network of a structure, which means that you will probably look at what's the ties between different actors or modes and how they will affect the nodes' behavior, the actors' behavior. So this links to our next question about what are the effects, the network effects of CBDC, and what are the implications for CBDC regulation down the track, and in the future, what we will see the landscape we have for international financial regulation. The one key issue here we see is that the major network effects of CBDC is possibly policy diffusion. So which means that you'll see, as you just we mentioned about the network as a structure, where the different currencies, I mean CBDC, they're linked with each other. However, they are kind of uncoordinated. So they're interdependent on each other because you have a linkage about, say, payments and financial transactions, data flow, but you are not really coordinating your behavior. And if we go more detail, they may have at least two elements of that. One is learning process. The different countries will learn from each other. They have a learning process of different states involving issue like technical design to the legal arrangements. How do you define the CBDC and in what, for example, under what circumstances you can freeze the assets, or limit the transactions, And you may also have an issue like, whether they involve national security, public policy, financial inclusion, and taxation and other issues. So these are kind of way where they may learn from each other in that regard. But of course, you also see serious challenges, because if we look at other networks, in some of the other pre-existing networks, not CBDC, but in other areas, you already see there are possible manipulation of information flow, because different nodes or actors may have a conflict in preferences. So there are tendency that you will facilitate or promote information that is in your favor instead of those work against you. And so these are the possibility where the information flow may not be complete or may not be sufficient. And also another limitation you may have, or challenges, a limitation or biases in learning. So whether you may not be able to access information, for example, if technology, they may be complicated, and also a country may not be, may hesitate, to share if you're being very detailed technology design and so on and so forth. And also they have a difficulty in accessing the implications of other countries' modes for yourself, and also for the because you may try to follow what happened in the short term and ignore what are the long-term trends. So these can be the biases in learning. And of course, essentially, the learning will be affected by the node's position, the country's position in the network. Whether you have a link between the country with other countries, whether you're able to get information, sufficient information in a timely manner. And they may have also, importantly, competition of ideas, as we indicate that they have different models of CBDC. It can be a wholesale one, retail one, can be account-based one, can be tokenized one. And they have also different technical design and different regulatory approach. One example will be to what extent you allow, privacy, and how do you protect the data, and also how you deal with data control, data share, data management, data usage, and so on and so forth. And the second effects under the policy diffusion is about competitive adaptation, which means that countries may not only look at what are the value of the CBDC itself, the policy per se, but also focus more on elements like competitive relationship, or they're competitive in the markets. So the CBDC may trigger competition of currencies, both fiat currency, but also private currencies. And that means that the states will act instrumentally. So that may be another potential problems in terms of that whether they may not necessarily work for the country which adopts that. And here it relates to the issue about network externality, because that if the network become dominant in the international payments, taxation, financing and other aspects, transactions, and you may attract other countries to join the network because of the externality like liquidity, and also use the role of the currencies of CBDC in the global economy. So here we see that the policy diffusion is a mixed bag. It can facilitate information flow, explore better practice, but they do face serious challenges, including competitive adaptation, which may not be necessarily rational. And then we're able to see what are the network effects from another perspective, which is cooperation and conflict. We're able to see that cooperation will be desirable because you try to avoid suboptimal outcomes, promote connections among CBDCs, data flows. They help to standardizing the IT or interoperability and financial stability. Or ideally, they help to address the complexity and so on and so forth. But in reality, the cooperation will be very difficult because that in traditional currencies, it's very complex because every country have a monetary sovereignty and they have a different policy regarding their social, legal, economic structure. And more difficult one is that they also involves new issue like data technology. And how do you share data, for example, among different central banks? Whether you allow CBDC to be used, foreign CBDC to be used in your country, because that is a data maybe accessed by foreign central banks. So they are very tricky and sensitive issue, and we are really in a very uncharted water. So the cooperation faced serious challenges, and instead we would like to see more conflicts in crucial issues like data and privacy protection, the legal restriction on use of CBDC, and more importantly, in those fundamental issues, how do you balance between efficiency and safety? Because, for example, if you highlight efficiency, you may not really able to, you may slow, you may affect the safety or, the other aspects of the CBDC operation. So there's a tension between efficiency and safety, because safety may slow down your processing of the CBDC, for example. And the reason for the conflict can be the different capacities, like the technology capacity to deal with that, and also there are many other reasons. But another one will be the different motivations regarding CBDC, fundamentally like how do you treat the relation between the role of the government and the role of the market, for example. To what extent the CBDC will allow private digital currency or other market-based one to operate and exist as one example, and how do you treat the data flow, and how do you set a boundary between the data accessed by central bank or the data, the privacy should be controlled by the individual users. And also have a broader issue like how do you consider payment, design, financial stability, and so on and so forth. There are other different factors like economic sanctions. There have been efforts where they try to use CBDC to work against all the economic sanctions or to attract foreign investments. So there are many different considerations which may lead to the conflicts as a network effects. So we see that network effects here will be either policy diffusion and also the cooperation and conflict. With that, I would like to hand over to my co-author Simin Gao to continue her talk. And also due to the schedule conflict, so she has prepared a pre-recorded video. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Simin from Tsinghua. I will introduce the last two parts of our research. Our research provides some policy implications on the impact of CBDC network on the GFM. We recognize that the CBDC network will likely become part of the GFM. What will the effect of the CBDC network on the Gfmb? If the structure of the CBDC is similar with the GFM, then it will strengthen the GFM. Otherwise, it will weaken the GFM. the GFM is currently a centralized system, the CBDC may enable a multipolar system to emerge. CBDC is likely to affect power differentials in the GFM. GFM will increasingly move towards a decentralized network and away from a centralized one. The CBDC network is likely to be a decentralized network, which could push the GFM towards becoming more decentralized. CBDC, along with the other digital currency, particularly Libra, has the potential to fragment GFM to compete with the traditional systems such as SWIFT. On the other hand, there are uncertainties regarding whether the GFM will eventually shift to a free one, even with the emergence of the CBDCs. If the US introduces a digital dollar, this would very likely slow down the shift towards a flat network due to its dominant position. The future GFM network, even if it becomes a flat one, may still be subject to hierarchical control. Over time, the CBDC network is likely to develop into a scale-free network like an airline system. If the GFM becomes a flat network, it may stabilize if everything goes smoothly, or become disordered and even potentially return to a centralized network if the flat structure does not work. The short summary of this part: it remains to be seen whether the resources flow in the network will be controlled by one or more nodes, and how the preferences behind various CBDC will be addressed in the networks. Our research concludes that the CBDC will be a game changer in the international financial system, and in all likelihood will trigger greater currency competition. The CBDC network will likely be a decentralized network, and as a whole adopt the approach of an uncoordinated network as structure rather than a network as actor. The CBDC network is likely to bring policy diffusion effects, but not necessarily leads to convergence. The CBDC network, as a decentralized network, is likely to affect power differentials in the GFM and could speed up the shift of the GFM towards a flat network. However, there are uncertainties, such as the possible digital dollar and digital dollarization. Regulatory response to the risk in the CBDC network is crucial. For most, it is crucial to address conflicts in the CBDC network to avoid a lose-lose outcome. In particular, international organizations are important for promoting cooperation and could be a kind of international hub for CBDC cooperation. It is vital to avoid a race to the bottom in the CBDC network. Rules need to be developed with foresight to address potential issues. The structure of the CBDC network could enable or constrain actors, while the actors will in turn affect the network. As CBDCs and the CBDC network are a moving target, the trends, risk, and regulatory response of CBDC deserve close attention. Thank you for your attention. Any questions or comments are welcome.